The village of Bearpur had one rule that no outsider ever took seriously: never stay awake after 2:17 a.m., but like all warnings that lack explanation, it was easy to ignore until it was too late. When Samir arrived there to visit his uncle, he laughed at the idea, dismissing it as another rural superstition, something villagers created to scare children into sleeping early. But on his third night, unable to sleep and bored of the silence that pressed against the walls like something alive, he checked his phone and noticed the time, 2:16 a.m., and just as he was about to put it down, every sound in the house stopped, not gradually, but instantly, as if the world itself had been muted, and then, without warning, the clock on the wall ticked once. 2:17, what followed wasn't noise, but the absence of it, a silence so heavy it felt like it was listening back, and then came the first knock, slow and deliberate, from the main door downstairs. Samir froze, his mind trying to rationalize what he heard, telling himself it was just someone passing by, maybe a late traveler, but deep down he knew something was wrong because no one in the village moved at this hour. And the knock came again, louder this time, followed by something worse, a voice. Low and unnatural, calling his name. Samir, open the door. His heart began to race, because he recognized the voice. It sounded exactly like his mother, who was hundreds of kilometers away, and that's when he remembered what his uncle had said earlier that evening in a half-serious tone: if you hear someone calling you at night, don't answer, no matter who it sounds like. But curiosity mixed with fear is a dangerous thing. And slowly, against his better judgment, Samir stepped out of his room and moved toward the stairs, each step creaking louder than it should, as if the house itself was trying to warn him to stop, but he didn't, and when he reached the bottom, the knocking stopped, replaced by a soft scratching against the wood of the door, like nails dragging slowly across its surface. His hand trembled as he reached for the handle, his mind screaming at him to go back, but the voice came again, softer now, almost pleading: Samir, please, it's me, and that was enough. He unlocked the door and pulled it open. For a moment, there was nothing, just darkness stretching beyond the doorway, thicker than the night should allow, but then, slowly, something stepped forward into the faint light of the house, and Samir's breath caught in his throat because what stood in front of him looked like his mother, but not entirely. Her face was right, her clothes were right, but her eyes were completely black, reflecting nothing, and her smile stretched just a little too wide, as if it didn't quite understand how human expressions worked. He stumbled back as the figure tilted its head and stepped inside without permission, its movements slightly delayed, unnatural, like it was copying him instead of existing on its own. And then it spoke again, but this time the voice was wrong, layered, distorted, like multiple voices trying to speak at once. You opened the door, now we can come in. And before Samir could react, the lights in the house began to flicker violently, shadows stretching and twisting along the walls, multiplying, moving on their own. And from behind the figure, more shapes began to emerge from the darkness. Outside, tall, thin, barely human, their forms shifting like smoke, and in that moment, Samir understood the rule wasn't about fear, it was about survival, because at 2:17 a.m., something walked through the village, something that didn't belong to this world, something that needed permission to enter, and he had just given it exactly that. He ran, not knowing where to go, the sound of footsteps echoing behind him, too many to count, the air growing colder with every second, until he locked himself inside his room. Don't stop US, but that wasn't the end, because that night, when Samir tried to sleep, he kept hearing faint breathing from inside his room, slow and steady, like someone standing just inches away in the dark, and no matter how many times he turned on the light, there was nothing there, until he noticed the mirror. At first, it looked normal, but then he realized something was wrong, because his reflection wasn't copying him anymore. It was already looking at him, already smiling, and before he could react, the reflection slowly raised its hand, even though Samir hadn't moved, and in a voice that didn't belong to him, it whispered, "You didn't close the door properly," and the lights went out again, plunging the room into darkness, followed by the sound of the door behind him, slowly creaking open.